And he had this, the idea that the price of a thing should be limited by the cost it takes to produce it. So along these lines, he created what locals called the time store. It didn't involve time travel at all, unfortunately, but what it did involve was basically an alternate currency based on labor notes. So here you see, among the dominant ideas of the time, people just trying to make a new society and a new way of doing things. So that was very influential. Something that was very influential on the development of anarchism, particularly in America, would be the abolitionist idea. This idea that people cannot be owned. They're self-owners, or just the idea of ownership doesn't apply to human beings. And especially this is seen in the abolitionists Lysander Spooner and Henry David Thoreau. These guys, they never really called themselves anarchists, but they were generally against the state. Thoreau said in Civil Disobedience that the best kind of government is that which governs least, and that which governs least is the kind that governs not at all. And when people are prepared for it, this is a government that they will have. And of course, civil disobedience had a profound effect later, especially with Gandhi. So there's this influence in Lysander Spooner. It was also involved in abolitionism, and he would be a major, not really a father figure, but maybe someone that the individualist anarchists in America looked to as kind of their mentor. During the later stages of his life, he was involved with the individualist anarchists. So that's someone who had a profound effect. The first person we know of to identify as an anarchist in the sense of no rulers, nobody ruling over another person, would be Pierre-Joseph Proudhon. He was Frenchman, and in his work "What is Property" in the year 1840, he was really the first to identify as an anarchist. And Proudhon is widely used as a quotation mine. So I'll quote from him now and say that he said that whoever lays his hand upon me to govern me is a usurper and a tyrant, and I declare him to be my enemy. And I think this really gets to the spirit of anarchism here, that we should live our lives autonomously, respect each other's liberty, and anybody who doesn't, we should look at least with suspicion on this person. So Proudhon's version of anarchism could be looked at, he used the word mutualism, and kind of the idea of mutuality. You're not working to rule over other people, you're working more for mutual benefit. And to him, labor federations were very important. So I'm talking about Proudhon and his idea of workers' federations. He envisioned self-managed, non-hierarchical workplaces, individual or cooperative possession based on labor and trading freely with one another. So I'm gonna talk here. I'll take a short detour here and just say that anarchists throughout the 19th century expressed opposition to what they called capitalism. And by capitalism, they meant a specific social relationship where the interests of capital dominated. So this took different forms, of course, because there are different forms of anarchism. But to more collectivist anarchists, like Fyodor Kropotkin, for instance, the wage system whereby people worked for capitalists was authoritarian and an obstruction to progress, and money was generally considered a tool to be used for domination. To individualists like Benjamin Tucker, working for an employer was not necessarily an evil in itself, but state interference allowed capitalists to profit by not paying the worker the full value of his labor. And you could argue about, definitionally what this means and all. But I'll skip that for now. And also to individualists and to a lot of mutualists, monetary exchange, it was only a tool for exploitation because of state privilege. In a free society, they expected some kind of currency to be used. Mutualists, for example, generally favored the creation of mutual credit systems. backed by labor to allow workers to accumulate capital. So you have kind of a free trading society of workers. And the individualist mutualist side, they're using money. Sometimes they're working for other people. In the collectivist side, usually they're not using money. They're in federations, they're in communes, things like that. So throughout the 19th century, you see anarchists involved in labor organizing. The idea of syndicalism, that you have an industrial syndic of workers in a workplace, managing the factories, managing trade.
Dance party this afternoon.
All right, and there's dance party.
It's been declared an assassin-free zone. There will not be any assassinations at the party.
All right, so the assassination game won't be at the party. We'll talk about assassinations later, though, in this presentation. All right, so you have this idea of solidarity as a weapon to be used as workers, and generally just people who are in favor of anarchism will work with each other for mutual benefit rather than trying to take advantage over each other. So that's important. I'm going to run through a little bit here because we started a little late, but in 1844, Max Stirner writes The Ego in Its Own. It's a very individualist text where he championed the individual above society and above all restraints, and has had a profound influence on anarchists of all types. Throughout the 1840s, there's a lot of unrest. There's revolts, there's counter-revolts. The authoritarians are clamping down their control of society, especially in Europe, where a lot of these ideas are being developed. So you have some manifestos written towards the end of the 1840s, early 1850s. Of course, this was also when Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto. But in opposition to authoritarian communism, we have Gustav Molinari in 1849 writes The Production of Security. He was a liberal economist, and he basically endeavored to show that we didn't need the state. Everything should be subjected to the competition of market forces. And he is often cited as a major influence by market anarchists to this day. Market anarchists, of course, being people who feel that kind of market society is a part of anarchism, the buying and selling, the peaceful exchange, whereas, for example, social anarchism, often used where there are other arrangements. There's labor federations, there's gift economies, things of that nature. So there's a lot of overlap, and there are a lot of different ways those labels are used, but generally that's how you could think of it. So you also have in 1850, Anselm Bellegarrigues has a journal called Anarchy, a Journal of Order, and he writes a manifesto in there that says anarchy is order, whereas government is civil war. In 1851, Proudhon writes General Idea of the Revolution in the 19th Century, major text. So moving on where the ideas and the action come together, in 1864 you have the first international, or the International Workingmen's Association, and this is where you have a major exchange of ideas going on in there. It contained Karl Marx was in there, and then you also have anarcho-communists like Mikhail Bakunin are in there, and he kind of denounces Marx and denounces the idea that you can ever have a peaceful socialist society by instituting it from above. And I think the experience of authoritarian communism in the 20th century really bears this out, where any time you have people trying to set things equal by an inherently unequal position of authority, you're going to have disaster, massacres, all that stuff that we've come to know and fear about the 20th century. So Bakunin was a Russian anarchist. Another Russian anarchist, Pyotr Kropotkin, came a little bit after Bakunin, and he had a lot of ideas. He studied evolution. He came up with the idea of mutual aid, that species that cooperate are more fit to survive than species that don't. So this was contrasted towards more winner-take-all ideas of social evolution. And this idea of mutual aid is one where people work together for mutual benefit that's been profoundly influential. So then later on in 1871, you have the Paris Commune. Basically, after the Franco-Prussian War, France was kind of in disarray, and in mid-March to late May, a lot of people kind of took over Paris, and there were a lot of anarchists involved. There were people who weren't anarchists. Essentially, they had a militia that was supposed to defend against the Prussians, and the militia was gaining a lot of power, and the French government was concerned about this, ordinary people having power. The militia annexed a lot of cannons that were claimed by the French government, so the army was sent to disarm them. But the army, again, was from the same sectors of society that the militia was from, and a lot of them just defected. They wouldn't disarm the workers, they wouldn't disarm the townspeople, and they basically joined up with them. And this really frightened the French government, so they initiated a siege and then a campaign of conquest against Paris that resulted in quite a lot of deaths. So Bakunin says about the Paris Commune, contrary to the belief of authoritarian communists, which I deem completely wrong, that a social revolution must be decreed and organized either by a dictatorship or by a constituent assembly emerging from a political revolution, our friends, the Paris socialists, believe that revolution could neither be made nor brought to its full development except by the spontaneous and continued action of the masses, the groups and associations of the people. So that's kind of the idea that revolution must come from below. People who try to oppose it are just authoritarians. So in 1881, Benjamin Tucker, famous individualist anarchist, founds the journal Liberty. He was very much influenced by Proudhon, Warren, Stirner, and egoism. There's also this school is also where you see Herbert Spencer, the noted liberal philosopher, coming into play, and his law of equal liberty, that everyone has the right to claim the liberty to do as they will, so long as they don't infringe upon the like liberty of any other individual. So Tucker and those in what came to be called the Boston Anarchist School, they generally favored an evolutionary approach. They focused on education and persuasion rather than, say, trying to overturn institutions immediately. So in 1886, you had the Haymarket Affair. So essentially, workers who were organized a lot by anarchists decided that they were only going to work for 8 hours. That was a condition of their employment. So May 1st, 1886 was when the 8-hour day was going to be enforced by just walking off the job after 8 hours, and enough people were in labor unions where this could actually be effective. So they did that, and then there were a lot of state crackdowns, there were strikes, and on May 4th there was a demonstration in Chicago's Haymarket Square. There were speeches, and the crowd was starting to disperse, and while it was dispersing, an armed contingent of police started attacking the ralliers. So in this melee, somebody threw a bomb at the police, and the police opened fire on the crowd. So there were 8 anarchists were blamed for what happened, who really, they didn't have, the only way they were even on trial was because they were anarchists. They expressed this idea that allegedly led to this bomb being thrown.